Much of what happens, what is discovered now, will of course be secret. We will not be given the full answer. As the world continues to explore the secrets of this atomic age.
It's time to find out with Diego. Let's go. Ooh, yeah.
Greetings, fellow travelers. As the week reaches its thrilling midpoint, we're broadcasting from the mountains of West Virginia. Embrace the spirit of adventure as you join us on this daring journey through the untamed wilderness of Let's Find Out with Diego bonus Overdrive Wednesday. Get ready to embark on an epic journey into the realm of the Surge series by our innovative author, a former educator turned groundbreaking writer who draws on 17 years of experience shaping minds to bring a fresh perspective to these sci-fi creations. The stories explore themes of diversity and inclusion in a futuristic landscape, offering readers a thrilling and mind-expanding experience. Immerse yourself in the mesmerizing world of the Surge series for a science fiction adventure like no other. Prepare to be transported to the realm like never before. All this plus more. Please welcome to Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, author and new friend to our show, Mike Haynes-Pitts. My friend, welcome to Bonus Overdrive Wednesday.
All right, Diego, good to be here. Yeah, thanks for the intro. That was really good. Definitely got me inspired to go read my books again, actually.
Oh no, as we were discussing before the show, we had a pretty good conversation on the pre-interview, and a lot of that intro, I borrow its bits and pieces, but I love sci-fi just like you. It is one of those things that we talked about that I think there's a lot of folks out there, they love horror, they love sci-fi, but there's like a certain group of people who really love sci-fi. And then I think you and I fall under that category.
Right. Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, that's why when people are like, hey, write this, write that, and you're like, I'm gonna write what I love, right? Like I'm gonna write primarily with a lot of black and brown people, as that's what I like for representation, people on a diverse sexuality spectrum as well, but then definitely tons of sci-fi. I love sci-fi, in particular cyberpunk. The books are around cyberpunk, especially that Blade Runner-esque is kind of the baseline template, but I know we've had more cyberpunk since then, or certain aspects, whether it was Altered Carbon or Akira, the anime. You could even say the Matrix is somewhat cyberpunk in some ways now that I think about it. But I think a lot of those influences came to play with the sci-fi. But my books also, while it's a cyberpunk setting, there's tons of sci-fi influence and love, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, all of those wonderful sci-fi things that are in there. Even like stuff from Dune. Dune is another big factor throughout my books. And seeing everyone be excited about Dune today now is like kind of the dream that I've been waiting for ages, in a sense, right? Like the average person knows Dune now, and I was like, I've been waiting for that for forever. Dune is amazing.
Yeah, and Dune seems to be yet again resurfacing and getting more popularity as it goes. Now, before we get into a lot of these things, my friend, let's talk about life before you became an author. As an educator, you work long hours helping other people shape minds and help educate them, so they can have a brighter future to whatever journey they want to go into. Was this your plan all along to become an author, or did you just naturally fall into this?
It was a natural progression. So what was interesting with the natural progression of it is, I want to say college, I've studied to be a film major, which totally different for where we're going with author. But at the same time, I always loved reading. At a very young age, parents got me into reading when I was 3 or 4. So I was able to pick a lot of the books early on. And there's one in particular I always, and is definitely referenced in the book, but I don't think enough people know about it because it was kind of geared towards children, but it is literally like this amazing Afro futuristic cyberpunk adventure, surprisingly written by a white woman, but she gets it. She so gets it. It is called The Ear, the Eye, and the Arm. And I read this book probably like 3 times, and it was a big book for like someone in first grade. We're talking like 300 to 400 pages almost. But I read that thing almost 3 times from like first grade to 3rd grade. I loved it because it was very far futuristic Africa. And it was one of the first times I had ever really read or seen something like that. And so this reading and writing, I got to do in school. I did a lot of creative writing as a kid, all the time, making up just, small little short stories were my funny thing. Like one of them, and this is like one of the most hilarious things now, but I guess you could say it was the first story that people enjoyed, was it's like Revenge of the Thanksgiving Turkey. I was like, what if turkeys became giant kaijus, giant monsters, and went around and attacked everyone else, and people became the dinner for Thanksgiving. So, and it was hilarious, but it had a whole bunch of details and interesting things, and I won't forget it just because the teacher was so excited that she wanted to share it with the class, and I wasn't embarrassed. Which there are other things that have happened in school which I may have been embarrassed about, but that I was proud. I was like, oh yeah, like check out the story, it's cool. And it's funny that so we go through essays, college essays, writing, master's school essays, writing, and all that. And I just always love writing. If there's one thing, I know a lot of people sometimes worry about essays or feel they're daunting, whereas in me, I'm always excited for an essay. I'm more excited for an essay than a test or anything else, because I love writing, and I've always loved writing, and I've always loved reading. So with that being a factor, like going into education was something I got inspired with because I started working with kids in college. And then originally it was math. So I actually didn't do a lot of reading and writing at first. I became a math teacher at first because I did not have the best math teachers. So I was trying to help shape minds in a different way than I was shaped in, and hopefully make math a better place for people. And then halfway through my career in education, I switched to like kind of more of a personal love, which was history, where we got to do a lot of reading and writing, and mainly nonfiction, but still a lot of fun with it, and creative ideas and just different worlds that people, knew, and cultures and things of that aspect. And one of the things I would have the students do for some of their final projects for when so I did ninth grade for a little while, and then I did seniors for a little while for history. And seniors is government economics, and we had a lot of very direct stuff to influence them on, like, hey, here's how to do taxes, here's how to do budgets. But for ninth grade, we got really fun and creative, where I had them make their own civilizations. So I gave them a list of things they needed to have. They needed to have a religion. They needed to have what kind of clothing do people wear? What are their resource gathering? What's their government structure? All these different things. And it was a very creative project, and they got to make it how they wanted. And it was really cool to see all of that. And then what happened eventually with the pandemic is I had enough time, and as someone who's always loved writing and always loved reading, and even before I got into the author book stuff, I had a couple of published works that were just small little excerpts on my travel, because I used to do a lot of international travel, and it was really small published stuff, but I, again, just enjoyed writing. And I was like, let me write a short story. Why not? And then I gave it to some friends during the pandemic because we all had more time. So they had time to read it, look at it. And some people are like, hey, this is a good idea. And one of my big sci-fi nerd friends like even offered suggestions for it. And then I kind of, as I went from that, I just kept adding more short stories. And then I was like, wait, what if I put this into a book? Like put all these stories into a book. And I had one of my coworkers actually she was an English teacher and very aware of things. And she actually, for the first book, she helped edit it. And since then I've had like an editor person I know better, and she's done all the books since. But I was very like kind of doing just whatever with what resources I had. But then that time making that book was kind of like creating that first civilization that the students got to. I had to figure out people's ideas and religions and what's the government structure, what are the people like, what's going on. And I had to build all these things myself. And then it became, once I had the setting, like it ends up becoming your fictional universe that you really enjoy. I wrote originally 3 books, and then I stopped, and then I decided to write more because it had gotten so easy to play around with my characters and my setting. It's kind of my default fiction now in a weird way. Like maybe I'll watch something else, but then I'll apply them to that. And I think so much of the reading and writing I did growing up, and the reading, writing, I was able to teach a lot of the kids and use their creativity, just kind of naturally progressed. I was like, well, what if I try this? And then I kept doing it, and I was like, okay, I like this. And then some other people enjoyed it as well. But then I learned that it wasn't necessarily even just for other people. It was like, I enjoy writing the books, period. Like, I just was like, hey, this is cool. I can keep doing creative writing and sometimes get paid for it. But more than the pay, more than anything, it's like, I just genuinely enjoy the act of like, hey, here's my characters again. Let's see what we can do with them. Let's have fun. And I think it's something I was able to share with students here and there to help them. I mean, with the amount of kids I've helped teach reading and teach writing, like, it definitely kind of became a natural progression from like, let me try it myself and see what happens. And now I'm so used to it now as I write the sixth book. It gets so different. You get really comfortable with it after a while.
No, it's interesting. You kind of beat me to the punch because I want to say, well, sci-fi can be very complicated at times because there's a lot of it that can go into it. It's, as an educator, you talk about math, you're talking about science, you're talking about history. I think those are the great ingredients that would make great sci-fi stories. I say that because if you're a sci-fi nerd, like you talk about you and me, where you could, even like if you watch Star Trek: The Next Generation or like a Farscape or something like that,
Yeah.
when they start coming up with these theories, whether it could be wormhole theory, it could be this theory. My goodness, man! I mean, I don't know how you do it, but where did you pull from to get a lot of these ingredients in your universe?
I think, well, first, there's definitely, so I think the most fantasy side of things is definitely Star Wars. The Force is a big, like, this is like, and I'm not spoiling anything here. It's just you can kind of tell from the jump, like, once you figure out what powers the people in the books have and the surge and what it is as a whole, it's literally the Force in some ways. So powers, but like, Star Wars had this whole, I'm gonna have a space opera fantasy, but still have tons of sci-fi themes. Like, we're having lasers, we're having spaceships, and it's kind of interesting in the ways that it has done hard and soft sci-fi at the same time, depending on what's going on. And so once I had that basis of like kind of that fantasy element, I kind of kept that as the only fantasy element, because the rest I kind of went into cyberpunk sci-fi. And you're right about like getting into math nitty gritty, because why, I know some people don't like cyberpunk, but I like it because for me, it's realistic. Like, it is a possible future, because it's, the classism of cyberpunk, the futuristic innovations, but also that it's still on Earth. So for me, I think what gets interesting is outside of that force, and even with that force, is you start to think about like, is that plausible? Is that, I mean, for your universe? And it's really funny how that naturally happens, where you're like, yeah, we know there aren't spaceships having photon torpedoes in real life. Like, we know this. At the same time, because of what's established, it makes sense. So I have certain like hover cars or certain powers or certain weapons that people use that might have a laser blade to them or something, which and I have a glossary for it now, which was probably one of the best pieces of feedback I ever got. Was someone said they weren't sure necessarily on things, and I was like, you're right, I'm making up all these words and you have no idea what half these things mean. I was like, so the glossary helped a lot, but it was the glossary, as I went through it, I added things that like I didn't even think were as necessary to add. I was like, oh, let me tell you how people watch TV. Let me tell you how people take photographs. And you start getting into really interesting nitty gritty aspects of creating your universe, where, because you're trying to make a fictional world plausible, which is such a big sci-fi thing, as you know, is like, you're like, well, is that within the limits of what sci-fi could actually do? Like, we all know it's fiction, but isn't it kind of cool when it's possible in the future in some capacity, So I think that's a really fun thing that just happens naturally as you start to build your universe. And I think there's things I've developed as I've gone through the books where and I've rewritten a couple just because I have a better sense. Like, when my editor was like, hey, so this is some of the best writing you've ever done, I had that and I went back into some of the earlier books, but it was to help also define with the glossary, like, okay, let me change this a bit, because now I have a really good idea of what I mean when I'm talking about this. Because early on, like, and I use Star Wars as an example, where people will get mad because they're like, why was this Jedi concept not here in the original Star Wars? Why was this type of weapon not in the original? And I'm like, I don't think a lot of you have written in a universe for a long time. And what happens in your universe is you get better at defining things, for one, but then two, you come up with ideas that are kind of an extension of an idea you had early on that, as you go through writing, you're like, wow, I think I can build on this. I think I have a good idea on reworking or changing some of these ideas. And you kind of don't get that until you're in the universe for a while. Like it's kind of like you have to live in your own fictional universe to be like, wow, what would be cool is, so like for a while, like early on, people have a lot of swords and smaller blasters. And then later books have like larger guns that have like laser machine guns, like laser chain guns. People have axes that have lasers, like just way more diversity of weapons. And it's like, well, why was everyone only having a sword and a pistol early on? And it was like, because I didn't think of it fully yet. Like I come up with, you come up with more ideas, and it's very interesting how that happens naturally. And I think, when I look at even like superhero stuff, how some people come up with new ideas for a character way later than the original. And it's like, it's literally like, I just didn't think of it back then. Like, as I've worked with the character, I was like, what if they could do this? Like, what if my universe could have this? Where I'm not, okay, suddenly out of nowhere, Godzilla shows up in my universe. No, that's not what I'm doing here, because that's totally mashing fiction together. But it's more of like, okay, what if this person has this cyberware augment that makes them fast enough to catch up to the people that have the power? Like, what if I do that? Like, and that happens naturally. I was like, hey, let me make it more competitive for these people. Let me make the technology more competitive to match. And the stuff you just think about, the more you stay in it. And I don't think that's something a lot of people who don't write or like really understand changes in sci-fi series get. I mean, you can look at even Star Trek as an example too, like the old original 1960 Star Trek versus even Next Generation, and Deep Space Nine and the advances that happened there. And it's like, yeah, because you just change your creativity as you go. Like it's just interesting how it happens.
Yeah, just like anything, everything evolves. Even armies thousands of years ago, they had to evolve with their weaponry and their armor. So it's only natural for a writer to give their characters and their universe a little bit of an upgrade as the series gets a little bit more mature and older. And talking about your series, the Surge series. So, what is the Surge series? Because it sounds very exciting what you have going on here. Something a little bit different, unlike other sci-fi.
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me is definitely the diverse aspects, which it's very Afrofuturistic. It takes place in Africa. So again, here's where that ear, the eye, and the arm influence comes in. And like, as much as I say Star Wars is influenced, I have to give full credit to like that book for literally coming up with so much of an interesting baseline of even conceptualizing a futuristic Africa. So like, to give like some in that book, there's like this, it's literally called a Mile High hotel building. They are detectives trying to solve different cases, and they all have special powers. And then there's a underground people who are more traditional African values. There's a gang with masks trying to capture these really rich kids as a whole. And then like it deals with like, and the guy is an important officer and his kids get taken away. And it has a lot of different perspectives as it goes through, but it deals with like, okay, here they're in this fancy home that has all these technological advances. Here's where the poorer people are. Here's where this is going on. Here's this gang and the powers that they have and the sci-fi stuff they do. And it just ended up being like, wow, these are a lot of just really cool concepts to see in Africa. And I honestly didn't see that again. And as crazy as it is, until Black Panther, which is another big influence on the books. And for me, it was like, I want to continue that, specifically cyberpunk, because I think sometimes we are in fantasy, but I was like, let me get a power because I want them to have a power of some sort. And primarily that's because of Storm, the Marvel Comics character. And she's probably my favorite. She might be my favorite character in comics, I'm being honest. But her powers of lightning, manipulation, things like that, which have progressed throughout the books and the powers they have. And I never want to spoil people all the powers that end up happening, but it's interesting how that's developed. just how Storm's powers have developed as people understand her atmospheric skills. And I think I was like, okay, I want powers, I want Black Panther setting, and I want powers, so I'm gonna try and combine this in a way. And then I'm also like, I want to have it be not as male led. So most of the cast, like this was a funny thing that even happened in book one. I realized partway through the book, I was like, I have almost no male characters. Nearly all the villains, side characters, the heroes, protagonists, most of them are women. Most of them are Black women. And that's not just due to Storm. It's also due to the people I know in real life. Like there are definitely people based on characters I know. And I tend to just happen to have a lot of friends who are Black women. And I think that's a really important basis, as because sometimes they're underrepresented in media. And so for me, that's a big push, because it's like, well, this would be the world I want, because these are the people who helped me in life, and this is who I want to represent. And then along with that, as a queer person, I wanted a lot of LGBTQ characters. But the way I've written all these characters, it's not like where Blackness is the thing. There's not racism really in my books. There is classism, and there is definitely, I mean, it's more fantastical racism, because some people do not like the people with powers. There are definitely some people anti the power people. And then along with that are let's see, what do we have? There's some fantastic racism, some classism, but it's mainly kind of based in having diversity being just natural. Like nobody's giving critiques to anything else. Like there's not a big deal. So that just happens naturally. And because of all those bases being covered, instead I'm just focusing on the action and adventure of a lot of the stories. So there's a lot of different things happening. We have a lot of different fights, a lot of different shootouts. We have heists, all kinds of cool sci-fi things happening. And it just happens to be really diverse characters, where it's like less of like a big thing and more of like, yeah, in this world, this isn't the issue. There are other issues: land, resources, classism, other things like that. Those are the bigger issues. So, but it's a lot of fun to write, and there's a lot of action throughout. So it stays pretty entertaining, at least for some of my younger readers as well.
And how many books so far in the series?
Also, Diego, I think you're frozen, just to let you know. I think your picture's frozen.
I lost my camera.
Okay.
That's okay. We keep going.
I think that's what threw me off for a second. I was like, oh, wait. All right. At this point right now, so what's interesting is I'm in the middle of a comic finally. So these are all, prose written books, and they have fantastic covers by Adagun Ilion. Got to give a big shout out to him, because I found him when he was freelance, and then now he works for DC Comics. He's pretty big. He's pretty big time, and like that is like probably one of the coolest things. And like every time he's like, let me know on the next cover, man. And I'm like, I am so happy that you still let me chime in for a book cover when you are literally doing stuff with Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. Like, and you're still gonna give me a book cover. So I think that's the coolest thing there for that. But because of his strong art, people are like, hey, do you have a comic of it? And I was like, oh, that takes time. And I'm learning as I make a comic, it definitely takes time. I have a fantastic letter, fantastic artist, but the process takes a while. Like it's a lot to get a page done. It usually is like 2 weeks or so to fully get a page done. So it just takes a while. And then also I had to do a different script on that. But so there's a comic in the process, and then I'm currently writing the 6th book. So as of being able to order, there are 5 books able to order, fully done, and edited and everything and ready to go. And then there's a 6th book I'm working on, which I want to say I'm 2/3 of the way through. It's gotten, and some people are like, wow, how did you write like a book almost every year? I'm like, it's gotten really easy with my characters just to write what I want to do with them. So there's this interesting mix of different countries and different cultures to experience that I haven't done in the books yet. And I want to mix that along with just, there's a little bit of family lineage happening throughout a thing. So there's kind of protagonists I'm always developing in a sense. And so there's just a lot of opportunities to gearing new protagonists, new setting, but still within the same universe. And it just ends up being really fun because of like me being so used to my characters at this point. So it ends up being really easy to write them. Like I almost was gonna like fully, completely, probably end things in book 6, and then I literally just the other day was like, "There's a way I could write more if I wanted to. It won't happen right now, but there's a way."
Oh, there's always a way. It's finding the time. That's the number one resource that you have to somehow
Oh yeah,
create more time.
which I've actually been. I mean, I don't. I mean, I obviously don't have as much time on the pandemic, and even being on sabbatical, I don't have as much time as I thought I did because there's always other things I'm doing now, um, from finding other sources of income and whatnot. But I think what's interesting for me is one of the big things I often tell writers, because a lot of people always ask, like, and it's something I didn't realize until like I started going to cons and conventions, and people were like, how do you write? How do you get into writing? And at first I'm like, what? Like me? And then they're like, well, yeah, you have a few books here. Like, I feel like you would know. And I was like, I guess I would know. And then so what happens is I realized, like, I tell people all the time, you have to like literally have a time almost every other day or so for writing, even if you have nothing to write. Even if you literally just sit and look at your notepad or your computer or whatever you use to write and just sit there for like whatever time you have allocated. I tell people, like, you have to keep that writing time sacred, which was a big part of the pandemic. I had a schedule for every day, just thanks to my therapist, and I kind of like went to write every day where I'm like, okay, this is my writing time. And sometimes I had things to do, sometimes I didn't. Also, sometimes I'd be like, hey, this is my time to work with the editor. So that stuff would happen too during that time. But sometimes if I had nothing, I would kind of just still sit there a bit and maybe even brainstorm. And the most interesting thing is a lot of my ideas happen very randomly. Like, I'll have a quick small change that I want to make that might change a character's personality or something, and it'll come at me in the middle of the night or when I'm at the gym or something, and I'm like, "Oh, this idea is great. I got to write this down." Like, and it's really funny when that happens, and then it might spark you to write more. But I tell people, like, you have to like give time to write. You actually have to actively prioritize and schedule it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
No, that's so true. It's interesting. It's funny because when that idea hits you, when I'm at work, I have notepads everywhere. There's sticky pads and stuff. I bring my own stuff, so I don't want nobody saying I'm taking stuff from work and using it for my own purposes. But when an idea hits you, man, I put it on a sticky note. I have a notepad because I know if I hear a story, I'm going to dig into it and then possibly find the person who had that experience and have them on the show. So very important to have something to write with. And because if you try to, it's like a dream. If you don't write it down, you're going to forget about it 45 minutes after you wake up.
Yep. Like,
And
I have, go ahead.
no, go ahead, my friend.
I was just going to say, I have, for me, I guess it's because I like the digital writing aspect. I have tons of notes on my phone, just tons and tons, that it might even literally be like one or two lines being like, she's got purple hair. Got it. Like, it might be, and like literally that's just the note. And like, I know what it means, but it's like, there's tons. There's like tons and tons of just small little notes on the phone that are literally like, what's this character's name? Or like, what about this happening? Or like, yo, what if they go there? Like, stuff like that. And like you said, like, because otherwise it'll go away. And sometimes it's so good, but other times, like, I'm doing something else and I'll completely forget it. But so I try and always write a note down when it just comes to me.
No, absolutely. In fact, talk about you can't see because the camera's down, but it's unfortunate. But I have notebooks everywhere here in my studio. And well, let's do this because I know in the pre-interview we talked about our love of sci-fi and what got us to the game. So for the listeners of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday who are also sci-fi nerds as I am, what brought you into this sci-fi game? What was some of the best sci-fi at your time?
Let's see. So I think for me, if we're talking about sci-fi that got me into it, is I think one of the biggest influences I had on my sci-fi in general is my dad, because he was such a heavy sci-fi nerd. He was a big Western nerd. I'd say his biggest ones were martial arts, Westerns, and sci-fi. And there are elements of all of those in the books. definitely a couple of shootouts or moments that happen. Definitely very sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek influences, and then definitely some martial arts influences throughout with the fights. But for me, growing up in particular, there were two I would say that my dad and I watched a ton together, and that was Star Trek Next Generation and someone like Geordie LaForge. And I've had the pleasure of meeting LeVar Burton about 2 or 3 times at this point. Great guy in person. So getting to meet one time we're getting to meet your hero is a good thing. But seeing someone like that, and it was interesting as I was getting glasses because I had really bad eyesight, it runs in my family. Um, but seeing someone basically like Jordy, who is a black sci-fi engineering nerd who had glasses in a sense, was very inspiring. And I got to watch that with my dad. And then we also watched the Star Trek movies when they were happening in the 80s and 90s, for the old original cast, when they had like stuff like Voyage Home and Undiscovered Country and stuff like that. And those movies, got to see Uhura, who I also got to meet before she passed. So again, another just great champion to me. And so these people were very big on influencing my love of sci-fi and seeing black people in sci-fi. But along with that was Babylon 5, which is a rare thing where my entire family likes Babylon 5. My mom, my dad, and my brother, we all liked it. You don't get too many pieces of media where everybody in the family likes it because we're very different people, the four of us. But sometimes things win us all over. And with Babylon 5, for me, that was the idea of like so many different people coming together and meeting from different backgrounds and races. And Babylon 5 definitely comes in, not necessarily because I don't have different alien species in my books, but it's more of like people from different cultures or sectors trying to like bond, and they have their own hierarchies and rules and governments and things of that nature, which Babylon 5 did a lot of. And so that was really fun to see that as well. And then I also definitely have to give the influence from the Matrix, because as someone who played video games a lot growing up, it was kind of like seeing your video game transformed into a movie. And for me, it was just really cool. And there's definitely even a gang based on the Matrix, because I remember when early 2000s, everybody was walking around with sunglasses and trench coats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember that time with everything. And there is a gang that literally, that's their aesthetic. But I think that was like just big because, again, Morpheus, which so funny. Some people called my dad Morpheus once just because of his wisdom, which was just hilarious. But again, watching that, and even sneaking in to watch films with my dad, the sequels with my dad in the theaters, we snuck into those. But I think all these things I watched a lot with my dad, and they were really interesting sci-fi concepts growing up for me. And I just loved it always because he was there. I got to see some characters that represented me. And I think having my dad just cheered on just helped so much. So there's a few dedications to my dad throughout the books. Definitely even a character based on him. And I think so much of that is a huge influence on all my sci-fi learning and knowledge. I've gone since there and kind of done my own experiences with different things, and like to quote Dune again, like Dune is another example. Like the 80s Dune I would watch with my dad in the 90s. So again, just tons of different things, because he was like if it was an interesting sci-fi, he was gonna check it out. And there's probably even more that I'm not even thinking of at the moment, but there's just so much sci-fi TV, film, and everything that like influenced my sci-fi ideas because of watching them with my dad. And to the point where now I'll recommend him. I think one of the most recent ones, and definitely again another influence on larger spheres having differences with each other, is The Expanse, that TV show, which I loved. And I showed that one to my dad and he loved it. So we did a bit of a reverse thing in that one with The Expanse. But it's just because like at the end of the day, like I always want to write sci-fi. I want to watch sci-fi. I know it's not always everybody's jam. I know there's some people who love the fantasy movements and elves and orcs. And every time I'm like, debatable. But if it's sci-fi, I'm there. Even if it's lower quality, I'm probably there. I just love sci-fi.
Because even bad sci-fi is good sci-fi.
Yeah. There's really cool. As a matter of fact, what was it? Someone who I talked to once was telling me like one they liked was like Brother from Another Planet. It was a guy in Harlem, but he was an alien. But it was also kind of interesting about like being the other person and not getting it. It was very low budget, but it sounded really interesting. And then another one I saw with my mom, that's one of my mom's favorites, is Enemy Mine. And like,
oh, you read my mind.
yeah.
I was just thinking I had it written down here, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like my mom, like that was one where like I don't think my dad liked that one as much, but my mom liked that one actually, and she's not heavy sci-fi, but I think obviously being married to someone who's heavy sci-fi, you probably start watching quite a few things with sci-fi. But in that regard though, like I think there was like elements of humor that happened there, but also again like understanding different people, because I think in one of the books I do have former enemies ally, and they deal with things and they have up and downs throughout the book that they get and disagree on, but like at the end of the day they're with each other on it. And originally they were on gangs that hated each other. So there's, like I said, there's like really cool references like that will happen that like I may have not fully thought out, but like it's still a part of my sci-fi ethos, I guess I would say.
Yeah, and with the whole day living, Louis Gossett Jr. He did a tremendous job playing that cat. The thing, I can't watch that movie so much because I can actually start getting a little misty-eyed because while it does offer a lot of great things, it's such a very sad story at the same time.
Yeah.
So for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to know more about you, your books, and the events that you'll be at, where can they find out?
All right. So they can find out definitely. So all the books are on Amazon through Kindle and hardcover, which I still have yet to order my own books in a hardcover. I just have paperbacks everywhere. But they're all there, at least the first 5, because I'm working on the 6 and the comics. So those aren't anywhere yet, but the first 5 are there on Amazon. Also, you're more than welcome to order directly from me because I have author discounts, and if people want to give me the money, because some people do that. They're like, I don't want to go through Amazon. I want to go through you. My Instagram, where you can find me, is the Surge Series Book, all one word, the Surge Series Book, not books, but the Surge Series Book. I'm not sure why I did that way, but that is what I did. And I believe it's the same. Let me just double check. Even though I rarely use this program, pretty sure it's the same for TikTok as well. Oh, it's the Surge Series Books on TikTok. Those are the main things I utilize. And there's a fan page on Facebook if people want to go, where I update on things. And people are always more than welcome to reach out about the books if they want to know, if they want to get them, if they want to get them from me. And where they'll see me next is, I only know at least, I'm going for quite a few cons next year, but the one that's absolutely set in stone and confirmed is in San Diego. Black Comics Day. It is Valentine's Day, so that will be interesting. I'm not sure everyone who can show up to that one, but which has also changed my Valentine's Day plans actually, because I didn't realize the exact date. But it is Black Comics Day in San Diego, and it should be, I believe, let me check the exact date if I can real quick here, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I'm not sure if it's Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday. I just want to be sure. It's Saturday, Sunday, so 15th, 16th. So who knows? Maybe I can have Valentine's Day early on the Friday or something. But 15th, 16th, Saturday, Sunday, I will be there with all 5 of the books in person to get them signed. We also have stickers and keychains of a lot of the characters and prints of the characters as well. There's the cover art that's done by wonderful Adagon Ilion. Also, big shout out to the editor, Erica Hardinson, who has her own magazine as well, Fabulize Mag. And there are several different artists who listing all of them would take a while, but they have done the artwork for several of the different characters. I'm always trying to get different people to do different characters. So that's really cool there. So hopefully if y'all are in San Diego, I'm there, but otherwise I'm in New York, and I usually go to most of the conventions around New York. So people want an in-person signed copy, but they're a lot of fun, very quick reads. Young adult age, I would say, is like, I would say 10 and up, except for book 2. Book 2 is probably my most mature book, and I don't know if that's ever going to change because that was the first one I wrote. But it's book 2 chronologically. But that's the first one I wrote, so it's kind of the rawest book I wrote. The other ones are all like 10 and up for the age group. So, yeah.
Hopefully, with all the cons that you and I will be doing, we'll run into each other, and look forward to meet you in person. And I'd love to have you come back next year because I know by then it'll be books 6 and 7 and 8. So I know they're going to keep coming quickly.
Yeah. I hope so, Diego. Like, yeah, I hope I can see you at some. That'd be great, for sure.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. Please check us out on all our social media pages. Catch us on YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
All content on this broadcast is a property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. The information shared on Bonus Overdrive Wednesday is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.